behind me.
I'm doing good, Mark. How are you doing today?
It's been one of those days where everything's going wrong. But yeah, we just ran down to check the cottage, and one of the roof vents caved in. So a little bit of water, a little bit of moisture, and got something else to sort out. Another problem to fix.
Well, you know what? Idle hands are the devil's playground, so this will keep you busy.
Yeah, well, my grow lights are keeping me busy right now.
There you go. What are you growing?
Right now I got onions and spinach, and next is red peppers and jalapeno peppers, and then snow peas.
And you've always done this anyways. This isn't something like I need to grow my own food all of a sudden because of what's going on, right?
The first time with grow lights, yes. Normally I wait another 3 weeks, start propagation inside, and then move it outside. But now I'm actually using grow lights to speed up that process.
Very good. So you've always been that guy who prepares his own food and gets his own bacon and all that. So this is nothing for you. You're ready to go.
Yeah, in the big picture, I guess you could call a prepper, and I have all that I need to survive for basically a year. I didn't run around panicking. Most peppers wouldn't in that sense. Uh, we kind of just sat back and took stock and waited for any events that might occur, and then knowing that you're set up ready to go, you don't have to worry about anything. I've only been out for milk and butter only because I don't have milk, butter, and eggs because I don't have a cow and I don't have chickens. So
That's right. Uh, what is the local area of Ottawa? Do you have any of like um, the Hutterites or anybody who does their own farming, like local small farming there?
oh my God, yeah, it's a huge area. Sybil Trim runs a farm out in the west east end of Ottawa. She has a whole organic farm that's out there from beef to dairy to. I mean, she's amazing. I want to get there. That's what we were going to do right up till about 4 weeks ago. We were selling the house, and then all of a sudden it collapsed. Everything collapsed. Nothing's even coming through in housing market right now. So
Well, nobody's even moving, right? So
yeah.
it's
Uh,
another unintended consequence of what's going on is that the real estate market is going to take a huge dive right now.
and it's quite ironic because libertarians, we believe in free market economies, and all these businesses that have been faced with the problems of non-storefront options are now converting and adapting and doing what they have to do to survive and provide service, from either drop-off pickups to distancing to pick up items and bags. And so kind of in one way, it's a libertarian dream that we're able to run and do it as we please in some areas, but in a lot of areas we've been shut down. They shut down the whole means of production.
Sure. So what do you see with the supply chain? I from what I'm reading is that there's some big meat packing plants that are shutting down right now, and how do you see that playing out in the next 4 or 5 weeks?
Um, I think there's going to be some easing that's going on in the next couple of weeks. The curve, if you can call it that, the real threat that the government says, which I do not believe was a real threat, it might manifest itself in perceived sicknesses and perceived health actions by corporations trying to do the right thing. Will it cause short-term shortages? Yeah, I believe that we're in for a period of high increased inflation for meats and vegetables. We're already seeing some of the effects in California, them not being able to harvest crops, and even here in local Ottawa, we got a guy with 100,000 pounds of asparagus that he can't get the people in to pick, and it might actually go to the garbage. So that will have impacts long term in the economy. But only for the short term. When we say long term, we're talking the next 6 to 8 months. There will be fluctuations, inflation, maybe not as much quantity and quality of the stuff, the odd stuff, but it's going to come back. It will come back. It has no choice to come back. It's just suffering out this time period in between everything going back to normal.
Well, so our government right now has been floating the idea that we should stay on lockdown and self isolation until we get a vaccine, which theoretically could be up to 18 months away.
Well, leave the whole vaccine out of there. The government shutdown is about the most egregious violation that I've ever seen in my entire 57 years. Could they put measure in place that would allow people to be social distancing, that would allow people to still interact and conduct business with common sense rules and guidelines? And remember, the only purpose for this whole shutdown was to protect our failed system of healthcare, in the sense that nobody was planned for this. No, even a non-governmental option couldn't be planned for this. But what they're trying to do is avoid the failure of the public health system to be prepared, even though they've known about this for years. They've known about pandemics. And I mean, you can go right back to 2001, 2002, 2008, when DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and the government of Canada went out and did studies to find out critical infrastructure, pandemic, and planning and stuff like that. They have a rule book from 14 years ago, and they're not following it. They knew about this. Nobody planned for it. They planned for it, but they didn't prepare for it. They didn't set aside the money for it. It's typical of our governments, both provincial and federal, to pander to the population that is going to give them the votes that they need to retain power without actually fixing problems. Because really, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this extreme economic hardship that the government is forced upon people, because the government is supposed to be the good people and the people that are preparing us for the world, but they are actually protecting themselves from the woefully inadequate and unprepared situation that we're in right now, that forces us to worry about respirators. That's what the problem is. It isn't the people. They are killing people's economic means because they have not done what they were supposed to do, because there's too much union involvement. There's too much people to try to please to get elected in the Toronto area, the Kingston, Ottawa, and Sudbury markets. Those are the most vote-rich and vote-heavy ridings, and they pander to the highest population of public service, 1.6 million people, and the most amount of ridings. So this isn't about protecting the people or for the people. It's about 2 years ago, it was all about how do I get elected? And 2 years since then, nobody's done anything to address the problem.
Of course, and I agree with you. So what I see here going on is a bunch of mistakes all the way down the line. At first, Dr. Tam says, "Don't worry about this. This is nothing. It's not going to spread." And then when it started to spread, it was, well, we don't have to close the borders down. Everything will be fine. And then the virus takes hold here, and they realize, well, if this does actually break loose, we're in trouble. And it becomes an extreme measure on the other side of that. So there was really no, it's not been a positive reaction all the way down. And now we're at a point where they feel like they got to shut us down completely. But I wonder where in here the WHO is going to take responsibility for that information, because Dr. Tam is basically just a sounding board for the WHO. And she's been taking their recommendations from the start. And that's really what caused the issue. If we had an active government at the beginning of this, and we actually thought this was going to be a serious issue, we could have closed the borders off early on and had those flights coming in. We could have had people checked at the borders. Anybody who had the virus, we could have quarantined them right away, and we could have stopped this before it actually hit the ground. So instead of putting 36 million Canadians on lockdown, we could have had a few flights that were quarantined, and we could have really taken this and protected the people first. But now that we're at this point, I think they're using it as a totally different thing. They're standing back going, wait, look at how easily these people are begging for more. Why not give them that? If our agenda is authoritarianism and the people are crying for it, why would you stop that fight? Why would you not give them that authoritarian rule that they're asking for?
Well, and you're right. You're talking about two very, very important issues there. The first one that I will address quickly is, what actions did the government take? And we know that they didn't take any actions. We knew that they didn't take any actions early on when we seen what was coming out of Wuhan, when we knew what was coming through Italy, as we watched it transpire in December and early January. And the government should have been taking action at that time. Well, this is a government about fluffy good feelings. This isn't a government about protecting the people. Now, that leads into, okay, if they didn't do that, was there another agenda? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but when my prime minister says that I admire China as a basic dictatorship, it's able to turn its economy around on a dime because of that ability to use force to force people to do what they want, which is actually covered under the EMA, both provincially and federally. Then when you say that Canada, the prime minister said Canada is done as a post-national state, then you destroy the economic engine of the oil economy or the ground economy of oil resources in Canada. It's almost whimsical to think that, was this the plan all the way along? Are we now going to destroy small business, leave corporate giants funded by the government, and all of a sudden now we're going to turn and nationalize our oil industries, nationalize our rail? It's almost too coincidental how it plies in with the whole mantra of climate change and more government control. And you're right, people are screaming for help, and they don't even realize that they've had their rights taken away. When you look at the Michigan protests, and you did a wonderful post on that, what you get is the people that are there with firearms are exercising their Second Amendment right, their constitutional rights, things that we don't have in Canada, where they have the right to rile against the tyranny, exactly what they're talking about in that particular state. And you're seeing more of these come up through the system in the U.S. We don't have any rights like that. So how can we even do it? If we're going to, even as a political party, and we've discussed this, if we're going to go organize a protest, well, there might be some backlash, but the only way that we could protest it in real legal terms was we couldn't get a permit, so it can't be more than 3. And then if we did get a permit and it was more than 3, which we wouldn't get a permit, then we'd have to be 6 feet apart trying to give our message. And this is what's wrong with Canada. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's that you say, and I agree with you, the people are clamoring for the government to come in and save me, save me, save me. But yet in the same token, the government has created the situation by being negligent in January, in February, before they finally conveniently had to do what they did, and conveniently CRB payments, and conveniently mega business help, and it's like 2008 all over again with a different mantra, liberal versus conservative in the size and scope of the corporate bailout. We're at $220 billion. Who's going to pay for that? The only way you're going to pay for that is nationalize our resources and pay down the debt with it. And I'm afraid of that happening.
We're going to pay for this, Mark, in inflation and extra taxation and the debt load that's going to be put onto our children for generations from this. We saw in 74 when Trudeau changed over our banking system. And I'm not saying that the fiat currency that we were printing in 73 to from 34 to 1973 was the best system, but it was a public system owned by the people, and we created our own. Yeah, and we created our own currency at that point, and we spent it into existence without interest attached. We built the St. Lawrence Seaway, we built CN Rail, we built the Trans-Canada Highway. And I'm not saying that these are the best models, but they're certainly a better model than what we do now, which is allow the creation of money just by a ledger change and interest attached to that, so that every dollar that comes into existence has $1.03 attached or $1.04 attached. And from that, it's like musical chairs. Someone's going to lose because every time they create another dollar, they take another chair away from that circle. And when we all try to sit down, someone doesn't have a seat. And it balloons and it grows and it creates all of these problems.
And you're right. We really have no implication or really understanding of 200 and I think it's 207 or 213 billion dollars that he's announced so far, with the 1.4 billion dollar announcement the other day. That's debt. And you mentioned 1972 at the end of the creation or the releasing of the Bank of Canada's ability to print money for the government. One of the simplest graphs that I see is when you look at our debt base from 1972, and you see each successive government has increased that debt despite whatever their mantra was of being socially conservative or fiscally liberal or however you want to put it. And we've had the wool pulled over our eyes. What you see here is Trudeau promised when he first got elected to run a small $5 billion or $10 billion deficit over 5 years. What he did was run $20 billion over 5 years, and into the fifth year, he was tracking for $120 billion in debt. That does not include this $207 billion in debt. When Trudeau took power, we were $634 billion in debt. And he's just added $300 billion to that over the last 5 years. And that is the really scary part about the devaluation of the Canadian currency, about the inflation that's going to come as a result of that, and interest rates that will have to rise no matter how we look at it. They will have to rise. Well, there's no place for them to go but up. But it's scary when I look forward into the future as to what my children will do or what kind of economic impact it will have on Canadian small business and medium-sized business, because really that's what we're talking about. There's lots there for everybody else in the form of free government handouts by debt. But it's the small lawn cutting service. It's the small home cleaning service. These are the people that are not qualifying for anything, or the small business like I was that invested all of his money back into the business instead of drawing a salary. So this is what's going to be destroyed. This is what's never going to come back, not for a couple of years until people get solvency again.
That's right. And that's going to be a terrible situation for our country moving forward. What also isn't being taken into consideration at this point is it's not only that he's going $200 billion on the front side spending in debt. We're losing about 25% of our GDP this year. And that's money that's supposed to come in on the backside. So I easily see us blowing past $1 trillion in debt. And a country of 36 million people, we cannot handle this debt load. And eventually what's going to happen is this currency is going to explode. We're going to lose confidence in it. And that's when the real problems start. That's when you're talking Weimar Germany, 1920s, when you were taking wheelbarrows of money to the
Venezuela
store. Venezuela today, yes. I said it before that we don't see socialism and the bread lines of socialism in our grocery stores. We see them in our hospitals and doctors' offices. But we're starting to see them in our grocery stores. And that should be an eye-opener for you that we're running into some serious social problems the way we're running things. And we need to be very vigilant as to where we go with this and how we move forward.
I think it's ironic that you said that we're close to $1 trillion. And a year ago, Fraser Institute released a study that said between the deficit and the debt, we were already at $1 trillion. It's $998 million. Now, since then, add $300 billion. Without the interest, we're still now probably tracking $1.4 trillion, $1.3 trillion between the debt and the deficit. This is going to hugely impact us. As for if you look down the road, is this a sort of like a cultured plan to ease us into socialism? I can't help but wonder about that. There's too many indicators. There's too many coincidental factors. I'm by no means a conspiracy theorist, but at least I'm a realist in the ability to look forward and say, is this sort of like a trial model of UBI that they're going to try to float to try to put in the one world government, the nationalized systems of ownership of the government resources, and major corporations are the only players, sort of like in a communist or a socialist regime. Only the friends of the government get the economic means, and everybody else, well, you're just peons and you have to survive with what we give you in the form of a tax credit or in the form of a UBI check or CRB check. Well, yeah, and I mean, most people don't even realize they're thankful for $2,000, and they don't realize that $400 of that is taxes due at next year for each one of those checks, and here we are in a perfect opportunity for Trudeau's mantra and the Liberals' mantra to shine. This is what they want. This is what they want to do. They want this. They need this. This is kind of like a trial run for them. They're like in glee over it, as far as I'm concerned, in the centralized power and the almost grabbing of power that he did, and with the first $197 billion budget bill before the House of Commons. It's truly terrifying if I really let myself think about it. And I do worry about it. I don't know if it's true, but it certainly shows indicators towards those kind of methodologies to bring us to socialism or a Venezuelan type takeover of the industries.
Well, let's actually talk about that, because there's a difference between socialism and fascism. And fascism, back in the day when it was actually defined, and if you look at Germany in the 30s, it was corporate control through the maximum regulation of government. So big corporations were fine to cooperate as long as they got along with the government, and the government would legislate to empower those businesses to take monopoly. And that's really what we're seeing here. We're not really seeing a socialist or a communist switch. We're seeing more of a switch to fascism, where if you're a friend of the Liberal Party and you're a big business and you donate to the club, you will survive and you will get those bonuses. But if you're not in that power group, you will fail and we will push you out of business.
Well, that's pretty much how every government operates. I mean, that is the reality of capitalism, and you could easily associate NAFTA with that kind of a thinking, because NAFTA is really just nothing but a giant corporate controlled market that doesn't allow anybody else to play in it, and the government sets the rules. And if you want to be the government negotiating between U.S. and Canada and Mexico at the time, then what was happening is you had to then belly up to the government with lobbyist groups. It created lobbies. It actually supersized the lobby groups to ensure that their particular business had no competition in it. So I think we're already there at that point. What does worry me is the destruction of the small and medium-sized business, because the big business are already in bed with government in that sense. And I'm by no means I'm a 100% libertarian and free market economies, which we don't have. But how much further of that smaller market are we going to be standing in line for from a corporate giant provider as opposed to our local provider, and who's going to be able to survive this? It is a scary thought process. I'm trying not to think that way, but I really see too many indicators that seems like it's going that way. And I don't want to be tinfoil hatty and all that stuff, but it definitely does play into a mantra of, it really is strange. It really does seem to fit. There's a lot of things that 5 years down the road, if it happens, we'll all be going, yeah, see, we were thinking, but no, it couldn't happen. And that's usually what happens. It's too late at that point. And I'm really worried about Canada's independent future as business owners, and the ability to create a living without more government intervention.
That's
And we
right.
haven't even talked about freedom.
We were, and I was just about to switch the conversation over to that, because we've talked about government overreach and we've talked about how this is rolling out from their end of it, and maybe they do have other agendas. Trudeau has tried to take absolute power now 3 times
Yep.
since this has happened, and he keeps throwing it out there. You know what? You just give me carte blanche, and I'll do you all a favor, and I'll take care of you, and that scares me terribly. But let's switch over to the rights and freedom side of this, and I will bring up to you Bill 10 in Alberta. I don't know if you've read about Bill 10 yet.
No, I have
Bill
not.
Bill 10 was passed with 48 hours of reading. From the time it was introduced, it was read, it was shuffled right through their provincial parliament. And
Wow.
it basically says that at any time, the health minister can basically take every single one of your rights away, to the point where he can say, we're coming into your home and we're taking the infected people from COVID out of your house, putting them into quarantine under our direction.
So under the EMA, that already exists. The government has the power to literally pick people off the street and force them to dig ditches if they need be, or graves, both provincial and federal. The really scary part for me is the suspension of our constitutional rights under 2A, 2A, Section 2B of the Charter. Sorry, not the Constitution. Section 2B of the Charter, which is our freedom of expression, and all the other freedoms that we apparently have, but we really don't. The EMA, both on the provincial and federal levels, as it's been written, allows the individual suspension of rights, and people don't understand that. People think that this is okay. People are clamoring to get more restrictions on people, and it's absolutely alarming to me that they've empowered. I think it's Chapter 7 of the Charter. I wrote about it the other day. Your right to remain silent. You have a right to remain silent despite these draconian measures that are put in place. And if you remain silent, you're still going to get charged. Yes, you have to give up your ID, even though you're not guilty of a crime for a municipal offense or a provincial offense in regards to the EMAs, short of a criminal code offense, just the Emergency Measures Act. And we are having people having their rights violated that are protected under the charter because it allows them to do so. I have to give my ID if stopped. Not because I'm guilty of anything, just because it's demanded of the authority. And remember, the way that the EMAs wrote, as I paraphrased in that post that I did the other day, anybody in a position of authority. So that could mean a city worker that's an electrician. That could mean a garbage man from the city of Ottawa or a Zamboni driver for the city of Ottawa. That's a position of authority, and we have to comply. And if we don't comply, they have the powers of arrest, and that's what EMA is all about. And this is terrible. This is terrible for our rights.
I want to clarify for those of you out there who aren't clear. EMA is the Emergency Measures Act. It used to be the War Measures Act. We changed it in 1988 to the Emergency Measures Act, and that is what has been rolled out federally now. Provincially, they have said, no, it's okay, Justin, we don't need you to take over our provinces. We're absolutely 100% fine with being authoritarians on our own. And that's what Alberta has done. They basically said, we're going to steal the rights from everybody. We don't need the federal government to take them. We'll take those rights from you. And I want to be very clear to everybody who's listening out here that thinks that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms protects your rights.
It does not.
It was written very specifically to outline where the government can step in and take them back from you at any given time. And at that point, it is no longer a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It is a Charter of Privileges and Allowances. If at any time a right can be taken from you, it is not a right, it is a privilege. And I want people to be very clear and understand that. There is a difference between a right and a privilege. Children don't have the right to go out. You have the privilege to go out until you say you can't go out anymore. You're going to stay home. That's a privilege. So they are not rights at that point.
Yes, and if you would have told me this 6 or 7 years ago, I would have literally gone to my drawer and made you a tinfoil hat. But the truth is, in law, our charter rights are nothing because the authority all resides in the government's authority over us, both in land, property, and our individual rights, speech, religion. They are the pickers and winners of losers of these. They have the ability at any given time to suspend your privileges. Not rights, as you say. Rights inherent are something you can't take away. Everybody's born with the right to defend themselves. The government has regulated that right and said you have a privilege to defend yourself now. You have zero privilege to defend your private property. You have a limited privilege to defend your actual physical self with reasonable force. And you have no free speech, even though it's guaranteed there in Section 2B of the Charter. And you have zero rights of ownership of anything in Canada, not even your own body. It's owned by the government and your choice of health care. You have none. You must take what we provide you. And you couldn't have convinced me of this 6 years ago. I was a completely happy, unknowing 90% of the sheep, as it's called, unknowing about rights and privileges. I just assume it. And I think people have had a really, really good hard look at our privileges or our rights, and they're starting to see the veneer of society that's been the underbelly for the last 20 years of people clamoring for more state control. And I never thought I would see that in my lifetime. I see where people are putting posts up about leaving notes on their neighbors, and this is the totalitarian state that became Venezuela, that was Nazi Germany. Not to say that we are Nazi Germany, but when you think of how citizens are willingly handing over their neighbors, how un-Canadian is that? That is just the most awful thing, awful thing, that we used to look after each other, and now we're reporting on each other. It's terrible.
Public shaming over people who are raising concerns about our economic health is disgusting. And to say that I can't manage my own risk by going outside when you're going to focus this virus in three places. You're focusing it at the grocery store, you're focusing it at the gas station, and you're actually focusing it in the house. By locking everybody down and having everybody have to stay together in their house, if I have the virus, I'm going to spread it to someone in this house because we're stuck here. So you're basically focusing this virus in three different places, and now you're going to say that you can come into my home and take me out of it. So you're going to infect everybody, and then you're going to be able to come in and turn us all. It's terrible, and I don't think that people truly understand in this country what it looks like to lose your rights. And I think we're a few generations separated from that. My dad came from communist Yugoslavia. He escaped in 1952. He was a 14-year-old kid, and he swam the Danube River in the middle of March to get into Austria, to get out of Yugoslavia. And can you imagine what would drive a child at the age of 14 to swim in an icy river in March to escape where he lived? And we're
Let
heading
alone
back
being
to
14. Who does that at 14 today?
nobody does. We don't have that will. We don't have that foreknowledge or that strength of
Fear,
character anymore. While he had
fear.
fear, but we have fear now, but we're begging our government to alleviate that fear. And what they don't understand is the government is creating that fear. The way this has been handled, the way it's been rolled out, it creates that fear. And I don't want to wear the tinfoil hat either, but it's awfully suspicious to watch how this is being
Yeah.
rolled out and to see the end result being, well, you're going to stay home and we're going to lock you down and we'll just create the money and you can live a meager existence until we deem it okay to not live that meager existence anymore.
It's kind of ironic that you use the breadlines of socialism. Uh, Government is still and has always been picking winners and losers when it comes to free markets, and we don't really have free markets, but I'll use that word. Uh, who's now allowed to? Which businesses are allowed to be open? The giant corporate culture. Obviously, there's some essential services, food, gasoline, and stuff like that. But really, if we can stand 400 in line at Costco, like mine in Barhaven, which always has 400 people in the line in it, but it's no longer good for me as a landscape company to do my business, or me as a restaurant to socially distance and only open 6 tables in my restaurant and provide hand sanitizers on the in and out. Again, it's all to placate and hide the terrible, terrible failures of our healthcare system all across Canada to be prepared. And to qualify that, I will say that no system, either the US or a Canadian style system, can be prepared for this kind of pandemic. And government's response is predictable. You just have to watch a certain bunch of movies to see the reality of what happens. It's a slow decline. We've had our rights slowly taken away from us. It's a slow implementation of stricter, tightening controls on the necks of the people or on the necks of the businesses that are trying to operate. And we are walking into it, accepting it, and we are letting it envelop us as it slowly controls. And I do believe it's going to be lifted, but people don't realize how tight this has become and how fearful people are as a result of the government's overreach and its power to control the population, to fix the problem of which they created by having an unprepared system that we're all taxed heavily for.
And now our medical system has never been less taxed than it is right now. There's like people being laid off. I was talking to Tim Moen just the
I
other
watched that.
day, and he says in 25 years as a paramedic and a firefighter, he's never had less to do. And that has to tell you something. This virus, and I know what people are going to say. Well, that's because we socially distanced and we did what the government told us to stay
No.
home. And I'll tell you that that's just a fool's errand to follow that belief, because at the end of the day, the virus is spreading at the rate it was going to spread anyways, because we're still all meeting at the grocery store, we're still all meeting at the gas station, we're still out. The measures are half-assed.
Public
They're
transportation is still going.
600,000 people a day still riding the TTC. They're talking in Toronto that it used to be 1.5 million, so we're down to 600,000 a day. Think about that. That's 600,000 people a day riding transit together. Nobody's wiping the bowls down. Nobody's taking care of that on that level. So you can't tell me that that we're socially distancing. All you've done is shut down the economy. I'm a bricklayer. I could work very easily beside a bricklayer and never be within 6 feet of him and build a brick wall. We call what in the middle of it, we put a twig, put our line blocks up on the end, set a twig in the center. And I work from that over, and he works to the center. We never have to see each other, but yet
Yeah.
we're in a non-essential service, so stay home. These are knee-jerk reactions to placate a public who is scared, and it's all vote getting. This is all this is about. Is at the end of the day, Justin Trudeau wants to look like he did something that accomplished something, because he doesn't want to be inactive. And I'm telling you that what I see coming from this is an awakening of liberty.
Well, I can almost see. I made a prediction about a month ago that there'll be an election this fall, because political opportunism doesn't go away. Before it gets really bad in the economy, it would be in Trudeau's best interest to call an election, because then he can stand up there and talk about all the wonderful things he did for the people, besides shutting down the border, which caused all the problems that have them the need to be this wonderful person. And the Conservatives won't even be out of the leadership mode at that point, and they won't have the ability to brand their leader and brand their platform. It is the perfect opportunity while you showered the Canadians with debt money and stood up there being the most compassionate person. This is the best performance acting that I've ever seen him do in his 4 years of being in power, other than during the 2015 election. I call a spade where I see a spade. I absolutely admired Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. I absolutely admired them as political masters. I despised them as what they were doing to the province. And it's the same way I feel about Trudeau and his performance right now. It's flawless, other than his stupid ability to be able to go around and go to his cottage and show us again that he is really truly a Laurentian elite and the rules don't apply to him. But I can see him pulling an election in the fall, because it makes economic sense, it makes fiscal sense, it makes riding out the tail end of the great benevolent government helping the people that caused the problem in the first place. And he won't have to suffer through the economic consequences of this in the following year. And because really that's when it's going to kick in the spring of 2021. 21-22, that's when all these problems are going to kick in the economy. We'll be able to ride it, and there'll be bumps, but it makes political sense to do that. We'll see. I might be wrong, but I can really see him doing that.
I can't see him wanting to ride out the economic fallout of this before he calls an election. So that does make very good sense. Everybody's still going to be in the euphoria of we survived the pandemic. People still have that money. They won't have, and you want to do it before the year end when we go to file our taxes.
Yeah.
Because if you file those taxes and you find out, hey, I owe you $3,000, you know, like that's gonna hurt. So as long as he doesn't say speaking moistly or anything like that again, and he can keep his shit together for a little while and ride it out, I think before the end of the year it makes sense for him to call that election to maximize what he gets out of that.
So days without an accident on a job site, which you and I are familiar with the board up there. Well, I seen a meme that had days without Trudeau making a faux pas, and it never seems to reset to zero.
As you said, he's an actor. He's a drama teacher. So he's on the stage and he's putting forth a narrative and an agenda. And for that, he's pretty damn good at it. He sure doesn't answer a question.
No politician does today. I mean, even look at Scheer's response to it. The Conservatives didn't shut down Trudeau from taking power. It was only Hegelian, or whatever that word is that they say, that it was a political floater out there to say that, oh, look, the Liberals, we're going to say this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to put this bill forward, and the Trudeau's and the Conservatives go, oh, no, terrible. Okay, we'll back off. So now they both look good. And people just had the wool pulled over their eyes for $197 billion, and they were happy about it.
And at the end of the day, he still handed over complete power of the government until September anyways. So instead of handing it over till 2021, he just shortened the term on it. So he didn't really save us from the authoritarian rule. All he did was made us re-vote on it in September. And this is exactly what happened in Germany in 1933 when they hoisted Hitler as the chancellor. And they passed the Enabling Act, and they gave him, unfettered authority. And history repeats itself if you don't understand it. And And I really want people to understand that we are going through this again. This is something that's already happened in our past, and you can watch it, and it's almost letter for letter
Yep.
on what had happened back then. And we need to be vigilant to these rights. The people of Germany weren't bad people until they were bad people, and the people of Canada are great people until they're not great people. So
So
we need to watch that and be
So
great.
we did have a repeat of this just recently in the last 12 years, and that was the 2008 meltdown and Harper's reaction to the economic markets. What he proposed couldn't be opposed by the opposition. Yes, they could rattle their sabers. Well, the same thing just happened the other day with this $197 billion. And what people don't realize that it is a political game of wills to make one's position viable either to the left or the right. And at the end of the day, did the NDP have a say? Did the Green Party have a say? Did the people have a say? No. And really, that's what it's about. It's about the power sharing of the two major parties. And it terrifies them to want to give back. I question any party that's out there to say that, will you get rid of Section 91 and 92 of the Firearms Act? Are you willing to open the Constitution or the Charter again? Are you willing to put property rights into it? And the average people don't even understand that. But none of those parties have any desire. Is Doug Ford going to give us property rights? No, he's not. He can't through the Constitution. He can ease the conservation authorities, and he can eliminate the OMB altogether, and the Ontario Municipal Board and the Ontario Municipal Act altogether, and allow cities and municipalities control their own destiny. The city of Ottawa has to go and get approval from Doug Ford for its budget. Every municipality has to send their budget to Toronto to get approved. Where's the city of Ottawa? Where's the Ottawa people's rights in that matter? None of them are interested in changing that. All of it's political gain, political will, political maneuvering. And like I say, the Scheer's actions were only a political grandstanding moment so that he could look like he did something to help the next leader down the road.
That's
And
right.
this is what people don't realize, is that it's all designed that way. It's all power played that way. I wouldn't even be surprised if there was some kind of a background that said 8 years for you. Okay, hate us now, 8 years for them, because that's what's happened over the last 40 years. It's been a sharing of time frame of power between two political parties with no thought to the people whatsoever. And that includes Ontario and pretty much every province as well.
I agree, and not one government in the last since Diefenbaker, I would say, has repealed one law. It just added on and added on and added on and added on to the point where you couldn't read the book in a year and a half. There's so many things that are legislated against us now. So tough times we're in, Mark. It's a hell of a world we're living in. But I always enjoy a good conversation, and I thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you,
And
sir.
we'll stay in touch, and we'll do this again.
Okay, Keith, you take care. Have a great day, and then go Ontario Libertarian Party. Cheers.
That's right. Cheers.
Behind